Hamakua aloha mahalo. E ho mai kai, ke hale. Me ke ho'i manu. Blessings to all these people gathered here and to this place of teaching. My name is Serge Kahili King, and I represent Aloha International that sponsors these talks. We'd like to begin our session with a blessing, and are we ready?
Ready.
We have two of our staff.
This is a Pele chant, and Pele really helps us to remember to focus, to be aware of what we're focused on, and that is what we bring energy to. So this is the topic for today, and we wanted this, so much is going on with Pele, and we want to learn from that. We want to be in harmony with what's happening. This chant says, E mihi kahele, as you climb upland and are in Pele's realm, when you're in her home, then take care of the kapus, the things that are sacred to her, lest you make some mistakes. So go slowly, go cautiously, with awareness, with really knowing what you're doing, because if you were to pick her favorite berry, the ohelo berry, then things could go wrong, and what they say is that you could get lost in the mist. So what it's telling us is to try to be aware of where you are and your place where you are, and to be in harmony with that. So when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. When you're in Huna, do as Pele inspires you to do. So here's a little, it's a cautious thing, so it's a kind of slow chant, but it's to wake us up to where we're focused and how we are in harmony with our environment. So let's sing. Okay. E mihi kahele. E mihi kahele, I ka uka o punae, e malama I ke kapue, mai hana hewae, mai ka'i malunae,
We start off with a Hawaiian legend related in some way to what the topic is. The topic is the most powerful power of the mind. The legend, we're going to use this time, usually we like to do a legend of Big Island. This time, however, it called for a legend from another part of the islands and another part of the Pacific, but mostly about Kauai. Okay. Ikabakahiko, Mamua Loa, Okapenakuke. Once upon a time, long before Captain Cook, there lived a man who was one of the greatest heroes of history and legend in all of Hawaii. His name was Moikeha. And so this is a story about some part of his life. Now there's all kinds of stories about him. There are many, many variations on those stories. So what I've done is taken from those stories and put them together in a condensed version. So if someone has heard a different story of Moikeha, fine. I mean, that's no problem in Hawaii, because there's lots of different stories about everybody. And like I said, different versions. So this is one version. In this time, that we're talking about, travel between Tahiti and Hawaii was fairly common. In other words, they weren't exploring anymore. They knew how to get back and forth. Even though Tahiti is about 2,500 miles, that would be 4,000 kilometers, still, they had these ocean-going, big, double-hulled canoes that they would take on these voyages. Well, at the time we're talking, Moikeha had and his brother, his older brother, Olopana, lived on in Tahiti. And Olopana, they were both chiefs from a chiefly family. You might think of it as an aristocracy. And Olopana had a higher rank. So when he grew old enough, he was given control of an entire district. And there wasn't any other place for Moikeha there, so Moikeha became kind of like his chief of staff. Now, Olopana had a beautiful wife. Her name was Lu'ukia. And she was also kind of a flirt. Hawaiians had a kind of an easygoing relationship with relationships. But there were also rules, you know, certain kinds. And if a chief decided he didn't want anybody to bother his wife, he could put a kapu, a rule, a law, and no one was allowed to touch her. So usually on pain of death. But nevertheless, the wives were just as human as the men, and so they all had affairs whenever they could. Well, Lu'ukia really had a passion for Moikeha. He was strong, he was handsome, he was skilled, and so he had a passion for her. So one night they got together. Olopana was off inspecting his realm. But when he did that, when Olopana did that, he had the servants tie up her private parts, put a lashing around her thighs and stomach, and then a kind of a lashing that's used to hold canoes together. Only this was made to hold something else together. But, like I said, Moikeha was very skilled. So she didn't resist as he undid all the lashings, and they became lovers. Well, of course, as soon as, you know, you can't hide something from that in what we might call the equivalent of a court. So when Olopana came back, he found out about this, got very, very angry at Moikeha. He was his brother, and he didn't want to kill him, so he banished him. He had to leave the islands. So Moikeha decided, okay, it's a good time to do that. He wasn't just going to go to another Tahitian island. He was going to get as far away as he could, which was, although it was fairly common to travel to Hawaii, it was still a long, dangerous journey. So he got together a lot of companions, and they got their ocean-going vessel, and they supplied it and got everything ready, and off they took for Hawaii. One of the interesting things about these stories of this time period, as everything takes place, in this particular one, for instance, in Tahiti or in Hawaii, nothing is said about the journey, as if nothing happened. In fact, in some of the stories, the storyteller says the journey only took a day and a night. Well, and if you don't know anything about what happens on the ocean, that's a real quick way to get over all that part. So Moikeha eventually arrives in Hawaii. But on the way, what we do know about this, one of his good companions was a kahuna kilo. Now a kilo is like a navigator, a stargazer, one who not only tells omens of the heavens, but knows the stars and their positions and how to get from one place to another. And, this is also very important in Pacific navigation, they know the winds. So, his name was La'ama'uma'u, and we're going to call him La. So he was one of these, he was a master of that. He had, by legend, a kind of a gourd, which is how can I put this? I'm not sure if everybody knows what a gourd is, but it's a kind of vegetable. It's almost like a squash, only it grows a very, very hard shell. And when you empty it out, in Hawaii they use it for drums and for carrying things and that kind of stuff. Well, he had a gourd that had the reputation of being a wind gourd. And of course, in legendary terms, he had kept all the winds in there. And he could control them. And he would let out the wind that he wanted to let out in order to go a certain direction. That's the legendary view of it. Some places in the Pacific, they said there was a gourd with 32 holes around it, almost like a bowl. And it also had a cover, but when somebody was going to go on a voyage, the master of the gourd would plug up all the holes except those that had the winds he wanted. There were others who have said that there was such a gourd, and it did have 32 holes around it, but they were for sighting the stars, something like a sextant. Not quite sure how it worked, but anyway, that's been told about quite a bit. And then others say that Ma'u just was really skilled at knowing the winds. In some parts of the Pacific, I have some examples of this in my collection. They have these maps, and the maps are made of bamboo, and they're really just strips of bamboo and curved bamboo. And what they are maps of both the currents and the winds. And usually they use little shells like cowries to represent the islands in the different parts. So this idea of knowing the winds was quite common in the Pacific. At any rate, he knew the winds well enough to get them to Kauai. Now, when we look at the islands, Big Island down here, and then the others, Maui and Molokai, and the main ones, and Oahu, and then Kauai we have here, kind of like an angle. Curious thing about the winds and currents around these islands is that if you're coming from the south, you almost always have to stop at Kauai. This is what happened with Captain Cook. This has happened probably with the first settlers, because the winds and currents keep you south most of the time and most of the times of the year, and you end up on Kauai. There are stories that say Moikea sailed first of all to Big Island. That's a Big Island story. Okay. That would be very hard to do. A friend of mine on Kauai, who used to, when he was young, he used to have only sailing ships between the islands. That was the only communication. And he said one time he got on a ship on Kauai to go to Honolulu, which is only 100 miles away in that direction. And he said because of the winds, it took them 2 weeks to get there, which would normally mean maybe a day. Okay? So yeah, those winds keep you there. So anyway, in this story, they land on Kauai. They land on the southern part of Kauai. Maybe on this island you've heard the term Puna. That refers to the southeastern part. Actually, this is the name for the southeastern part of any of the islands. But this is the place where it has actually stayed as a name. But on Kauai, that was called Puna, and the chief of that area was called Puna. So when these Moikea and his crew, they landed there, and they were greeted by the chief and all of his court, and they were also greeted by the chief's 2 lovely young daughters, Ho'oipo and Hina. Well, of course, they had an attraction for Moikea, he had an attraction for them, but, they had a lot of chiefs that wanted them to be their wives. So the chief Puna, he thought up a test to see who would be worthy of his daughters. Now, let's bring Kauai from up here down here. It's almost a round island. And so what the chief did, he sent a servant to take a very valuable artifact. It's called a niho palaua. It's a pendant worn around the neck that has a great big whale tooth. It's carved whale tooth on the end of it. Okay? And this was, representative of the highest chiefly rank. So he had that hidden on this island. Here's Kauai, here's Niihau, and then about 40 miles from Kauai, from the edge of Kauai, down over in the ocean this way, is a kind of like an islet, very small island called Ka'ula, which could be translated as the sacred one. At any rate, there's Ka'ula. It has caves on it too, but it's mainly just a big crescent-shaped wall of rock. So the servant hid the pendant in one of the caves. And the chiefs, who were after the daughters, had to sail single-person canoes from roughly, let's say, Kapa'a or Wailua on Kauai, and they had to sail out down south of that, around the point, going on further across the ocean until they finally get to Ka'ula. So, thanks to what he learned from La'a, he knew about the winds, he knew about navigating, and he was so good that he got to the island, found the pendant, and was halfway back before any of the others even got to the island. So he comes back, lands, presents Chief Puna with the lei, and we call anything around the neck a lei, and got the daughter. Well, he had his choice of the daughters, but the daughters decided that they both wanted to marry him. So he married both of them, and not too uncommon among the chiefs in old Hawaii. And one legend says that they had 12 children, who all became famous on their own. And that Moikeha, when Puna died, Moikeha became the very first, it was called an aimoku, of the island of Kauai. That means he became the first chief in Hawaiian history to rule an entire island. So, Pipihola Kika'au, the tale is told. Now from that, we're going to get into the topic itself. The topic, as I said, was the most powerful power of the mind. There are a lot of powers of the mind. In my opinion, the most powerful one is the power to focus thought. Because from that comes all the other powers. That comes first. Focused thought. Because focused thought makes things happen. Ordinary thoughts don't make things happen. Focused thoughts make things happen. If thoughts themselves made things happen, life would be chaos. Some people already think it is, but they don't really know what chaos is. Chaos would be 6 billion people having all their thoughts becoming reality at the same time. Now, if thoughts made things happen, that's what would happen. That's not how it happens, though. The first thing to know is focused thoughts makes things happen. The second thing is to know how that works. When we focus our thoughts, we send out, that generates what you might call a wave of mental energy. And what the focus really does is the wave of mental energy stimulates emotional energy, and emotional energy stimulates physical energy. That's the process of how it happens. Give you an example. When the wind is blowing in one direction, and it's blowing across the ocean, it stimulates the formation of waves. That's where almost all waves come from. The focused blowing of the wind. And they travel across the ocean and they reach land. And if they're strong enough and if they last long enough, they change the land. Actually change it physically. Another example. When the sun shines down, heats the water of the ocean, The water evaporates, rises up, forms clouds, drops water as rain. The rain forms rivers. The rivers change the land. They nourish the people and the animals, and human beings can use that for making other kinds of energy. To make it more clear, if we think of the wind or the sun as focused thoughts, the water as emotional energy, then the land and all the other things that happen represent the physical reaction to emotional energy. So, focused thoughts generate mental waves generate emotional waves produce physical activity and action and reaction. So, that's the general process. Now, the second thing to know, you've got the first thing, the second thing, the third thing to know. The third thing to know is that the effect of focused thought is partly dependent on the duration of the focus, and partly dependent on what we might call the intensity of it. Well, when we talk about the duration of focus, the longer you hold a focus, just like the longer the wind blows across the ocean in one direction, the stronger the effect, the more emotions are generated. And then those emotions have, like I said, effect on the world. And on your activities and on everything. Everything that we know of that concerns human activity in any way is a product of focused thought. All agriculture, clothing, technology, transportation, gardens, you name it. All of that are products of focused thought. So that's how important, how vital that particular kind of thinking is as far as making things happen. When you hold a focus, we can call it a sustained focus. When you hold that focus, it gets strong. It has stronger and stronger effects. The couple problems people have. One of them is holding focus. How do you keep that? One of the best ways is to make what your purpose is for doing that. You've got to have a purpose. Making that very important. The more important you make it, the easier it is to keep your focus. If you begin to doubt the importance of whatever it is you're doing, well, then that weakens the focus and that kind of scatters the energy, and unless you're tuned into somebody else's focus, nothing happens. Now, there are a lot of people who say, well, a lot of things happen, and these people aren't particularly focusing. Well, that's what happens. See, they are tuned into someone else's focus. If somebody is working for a company that makes cars, and they may just be shuffling papers on the office or entering computer data, okay? And they're not really focused on it. They're nevertheless part of the system of someone in there whose focus keeps the company going. And usually, when you have a corporation, that builds up such a momentum because more people do it, more people have that focus and that purpose, and they keep going. So it becomes less important what the other people are doing. I mean, they're playing a part, but it's not their focus which is making the cars. It's the people who have the overall purpose in mind and maintain that. When they stop maintaining that, that's when profits go down, that's when people stop buying the product, that's when the company starts to fall apart. We could use this with any human endeavor, but you get the concept I'm talking about. So sustaining the focus is very important to anything you want to accomplish. It doesn't have to be a corporation, it can be anything. It can be an education, it can be a healing. In healing, when there is the mental energy and the thoughts stimulate an emotions of, let's say, fear or anger, that then there's a physical reaction of the body that tends to resist that, which inhibits the healing. If the thoughts are different, if the thoughts are for the healing and focused on the healing, then that stimulates and enhances the natural healing process of the body and makes it better. Like doctors, valid doctors recognize that the healing comes from within. The patient has to want to be healed or to heal. And that's where the healing comes from. If the patient is not engaged, the doctor can't do much. So even in such a small thing like that, with us personally, the focus thought is what helps make the healing happen, or even the illness happen. In relationships, when those mental thoughts stimulate the emotional thoughts of something like fear and anger, there are lots of subtle emotions, but we'll use the big ones. Then, when that results in people taking the actions of avoidance or violence, then you get all kinds of destruction going on in some form or another. But when those same thoughts are stimulating emotions of love and cooperation, then the physical reaction to that is connection and support. And it always follows this three-step process of focused thinking, emotional stimulation, and physical reaction. Now, the other thing, one more thing, there's a fourth thing that's involved, that's necessary for the focus, to empower the physical focus. And that's the amount of energy that goes into the whole thing. Now, mental energy by itself is not very strong. Mental energy, no matter how much you focus, it doesn't do anything unless there's emotional energy involved. Random thoughts, okay, even focused thoughts that have no emotional connection, hardly have any effect at all. It's when the emotional connection comes that the physical action is stimulated. Without the emotions, that doesn't happen. So, when we really want to do something, when we have a lot of emotion about it, that of course increases the strength of the whole process. But there's a way to maximize that even more. Some people do this easily, some people might not be comfortable with it. But there's two particular things. You can use energy around you. There are things that people talk about called power spots. Places where the energy seems particularly strong. Interestingly enough, in spiritual teachings, these are often mountaintops, mountain peaks, or they might be caves. And the energy is strong enough there so that for those who really know this, if you focus on something in those places, then the effect of your thoughts have a greater ability to stimulate emotional stimulation and physical reactions. If you're just focusing on, even in those power places, just something very, very abstract, why you may personally get some effects, but it won't have much other effect on anything. But when those places are used for focused thought to create or produce something, then that can give them more power. It doesn't have to be caves or mountaintops. There's so many different kinds of things. Tuning into the magnetic field of the earth is going to help do that. All kinds of other kinds of locations. If you know anything about Chinese feng shui, there are certain parts of buildings that are stronger than other parts of buildings for focusing your thoughts and doing things. Actually, one of the things is a corner of a building, like inside a room. And I have a theory, because I've never done the experiments to test it, but it is my theory, that this was the purpose of the very, well, as far as long ago as buildings were made at any rate, sticking a kid in the corner when they did poorly on a test or they weren't very able to concentrate or those kinds of things. They put them on a chair in the corner. It became thought of as a punishment. The original purpose may have been to energize the kid and help them focus their thoughts. Because they also used to put what was called a dunce cap. You know how similar that is to a witch's hat? And the reason witches wore that kind of hat, magicians, those who did, was because the cone shape energized the brain. And again, helped the emotional stimulation. So there's all kinds of ways to do that. So that's using energy around you for doing that when you really want to start thinking about something that you want to do a lot. But the other way, probably the most difficult way for a lot of people, is to just purposely get excited about it. Just decide to get excited. Okay? Yes, you can do that. Okay? You don't have to wait for excitement to happen. You can get yourself all excited and jump up and down and dance and sing, do all kinds of things, and then do some action. And what you'll find is the action you do is going to be far more effective. It's going to produce better results. Because you have purposely built up that energy. And some people, well, I don't feel excited. Well, so what? You can still make it happen if you want to. But like I said, some people feel very uncomfortable with that. They have this kind of a threshold of excitement that they allow themselves. Fortunately, there are other ways to increase the energy, so, you know, it's not necessary that you do something like that. It's just one of the options you have. And then, also along these final lines, putting this stuff all together, the things that I've told you and the examples I've given, if we want to put all of that into Hawaiian, the whole thing is condensed so beautifully. Okay? The Hawaiian phrase for this is Ulu Keali. Hana Ka'ukali. Continuous thought, that's what Ulu means. Continuous thought is the chief. Action is the follower. Pau Ka'ola. The story is told. Do you have any questions or comments on any of this? Yes?
Is it just as useful to get excited or have some wonderful, strong feeling that's totally unrelated to the topic?
Oh, sure. Sure, it doesn't have to be related to the topic. This, you know, I just was talking with someone about ecstatic dance. And they happened to mention that, yes, you know, ecstatic dance, you get all these wonderful, glorious feelings, it's very exciting, but nothing is done with it. It's done to feel good. That's okay, you know, there's no rules. But in ancient times, ecstatic dance was used to invigorate the land, to, you know, in a way, energetically fertilize it. It was a very important part of the process, and they had special kinds of celebrations, joyous celebrations at different times of the year. They were done to increase the harvest. It was done for the spring, you know, to have the growth. That's right. So they did the dances for the joy of it, and then focused that energy on what they want. Some of the ways that you can focus, I didn't mention so much, were like very clear words, like affirmations, like directions. Some people use self-talk to get themselves motivated to do something or keep going, and that's part of the process. That's focusing, helping to focus the thought. Imagination can be used. Imagining not only what you want, but how it's going to come about, and the benefits. Imagining the benefits and getting excited about those is very, very powerful in helping you to bring this, whatever it is you want it to be. But, so those help to focus. But you can do that while you're energized by something else, or after. As long as the energy is still there, then wham bam. And then you've got to take some physical action. There's this idea around a lot in metaphysics that like attracts like. And it's not a bad idea, but a little bit of like attracts just a little bit of like. Okay? It's when the emotions are involved and physical action is involved. I did one time, I used to do a lot of hypnotherapy, clinical hypnotherapy, and a woman came to me, she wanted to be more comfortable with a crowd of people. Like her job was saying she had to go to these cocktail parties and she interacted, and she really couldn't do it. So we went through a lot of the hypnotic stuff, which is just a way of focusing thought. And in that, I was training her how we react to people, about things to say, about how to feel, and all that kinds of stuff. And she came back next week and she said, it didn't work. What do you mean it didn't work? She said, it didn't work. Nothing happened. I said, did you go up and talk to anybody? No. Well, that is part of the process. And, she wanted it to happen to her. It's not the way it works. You build up the focus, you build up the energy, and you act. That's the necessary third part. Yes?
Regarding individual focus
Yes.
versus collective focus,
Yes.
do the Hawaiian people believe in coming together to focus on something?
Oh, yes, sure.
To come about change?
The question was individual focus and group focus. And the question was, did the Hawaiians ever do things to get together and focus? Of course. They had, especially in ancient times, they would have special ceremonies for special purposes. And usually these were centered around what we call heiau. Heiau has been described as temple, but doesn't quite fit what it did. There were different kinds of heiau for different purposes. There were some that were devoted to agriculture. There were others that were devoted to fishing. There were others that were devoted to, for the high chiefs especially, for winning wars. What they would get together, and there would be this long session of prayer and focus and building up the intention, and then going out and taking action for that. Yes.
I was.
Okay. Yes.
I couldn't help but have my attention drawn to your wand as you're speaking,
Yes.
and how you might be using that to focus
That's a focus
attention.
too. Yes.
Good guy,
Right.
yeah.
This is actually Dumbledore's wand from the Harry Potter series.
Yeah. Dumbledore, we recognize.
It is traditional in Hawaii for a teacher or a healer to carry a wand or a staff of some kind. Usually I have a Hawaiian one that I use, but I decided this is kind of fun and it serves the same purpose.
We're passing
But that's
it
the
to
whole
each
point
other,
of the
right?
wand. That's right. You
When
point
we
the
spoke.
wand at what you want to happen, and what it's doing is helping to increase your focus.
When we spoke our names, we were,
Sure.
actually, he was passing that around to all of us.
Sure, that would, you're all getting focused,
And
right?
we were all paying attention to
Yes.
each other's name.
When we are focused on sending healing energy
Yes.
to someone or something or whatever, what kind of action would we do at the end of that?
That's a good question. When you're doing something like that, especially at a distance, symbolic action is what's needed in order to take the place of whatever is physically possible. Okay? So sometimes it can be a simple gesture. Sometimes it can be, let's say, putting a piece of fruit on something or giving it as a gift. in some way. The Hawaiians would sometimes, when they were connecting with their gods, the spirits, forces of nature, and they would bring, let's say, to the temple, to the heiau, they would bring maybe food of some kind. And they would place it on a special thing that's been described as an altar. But they were very, very practical people. And in some parts of the world, offerings were brought and they were left there to rot. And in the minds of the people, the rotting was the gods eating the stuff. Hawaiians didn't do that.
No.
These were an island people. They had famine problems a lot. They brought the food. The food was for the priests who managed the whole affair, who in some cases lived at the heiau, and maybe sometimes shared with the people who came. It was the aroma that was the food for the gods.
Oh, nice.
And aroma played a very, very important role.
Like the smell
in
of the
culture.
rain or the smell of the...
That's right. The smell of it was
the
there.
fluid from the volcano.
Sure, Connie. If you happen to go to the volcano and you see these packages of food lying on the edge, that's a shame. That's garbage. Rangers have to clean it up. That's not,
It makes more work.
it's not an original appropriate offering. Okay. If you want to make an appropriate offering today, admiration of the volcano,
Just simply. You don't
appreciation.
need a bottle of gin.
If you know a nice prayer for Pele, that's good. But just the appreciation from the heart is, or if you want to bring a flower that smells and wave it around.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's more appropriate.
So it sounds as if you, in that sequencing, you could almost enter it at different places. You could, instead of necessarily starting with the thought, I suppose the other thing that you're saying really is that we...
But that's where they all come from.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about the emotional...
Yeah, well, see, sometimes we have the habit, something happens, we get emotional about it. And because it's a habit, we don't even give any thought to the thought behind it. But emotions don't happen unless there's a thought behind it. And we may become so used to that it just happens so quickly. Okay? We get in the car and we can get in the car, turn on the key, drive away down the road without even thinking about it and find ourselves, halfway to where we want to go, and we think we haven't thought about it. But that never happened unless there was some degree that focused thought that you had a reason for going, the emotional energy that got you out of your chair in the living room and into the car, and then you let habit take over.
I guess I was thinking about, I agree that the thought, whether we're conscious of it or not, is the operating principle, but that we can kind of counteract, like let's say you have you got a real stuck thought, you just can't make it work any other way, but you can transfer some of that emotional energy toward it.
Shortchanging the thought.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. But see, that comes...
Siphoning it off almost.
That comes, yes, and that comes from another thought. Okay. That's got to be a focused thought with the intention to do that.
So we should all be recycling.
Well, I think we
In
are.
a way, why not? Yeah?
Sure. Recycling our thoughts.
Focus on that.
Excuse us, I'm just tired.
Okay. All right, anything else? Yes.
What about if you have a focused thought and the person next to you has a focused thought
Yes.
and they're in contradiction to each other? Are you living in a house
Sure.
like that? Or
Here's, whether you like it or not, this is what happens. I taught my son when he was taking martial arts, and he was having trouble. How was he going to win? He wanted to enter into competitions. So I gave him a secret. I said, look, everything else about the same. You and your opponent, skill level, roughly about the same. The guy who's going to win is the one who is most present and most focused, most confident. Most present and most confident. That's going to be the winner.
Confident.
And he went on to win contest for the next 5 years that way. So when there's two people and things that they both want to do the same thing, and it involves each other, the one with the most presence and confidence is going to take precedence. Most people don't know that. So if you find yourself in such a situation, increase your presence and increase your confidence, and that will help you. With enough of that, they'll take their lead from you. You'd be surprised, especially if you'll include a very powerful thing, which is a thought that stimulates emotions and action. If you can take the time to compliment them silently on anything that's good about them, they will tend to, if you keep doing this, it's got to be focused, sustained. If you keep doing this, they will tend to relax and begin to cooperate and not be in conflict anymore. It's not control. It's a reaction to being appreciated.
Natural.
Very powerful,
More
but
positive.
not guaranteed with some people. Yes?
How about good and evil? Focus on good and evil. Is there?
Well, if you're focusing on good and evil as an abstract, nothing's going to happen. If you're focusing on good things, or doing good things, or creating good things,
Empowering.
versus
emotion.
evil things, that's where you're going to have to be still, the thought, the emotion, and the effect. Even wars are a product of focused thought, unfortunately, but it depends on what people are focusing on. Yes.
Can you remind us of Ulu Ke Ali'i?
Yes. No, excuse me. Yes, that's right. Ulu, K-L-E-E.
Okay. The leaves come from the branches.
Continuous, no. That means continuous thought is the chief.
Okay.
We're talking one word, ulu, and another word, the K there is just like the. Ali'i means chief. Okay?
Continuous
And
thought.
and the second part is hana, which means action in this context. Ukali.
Ka'ukali.
Yes, U-K-A-L-I.
Hanu.
Hana.
Hana, sorry.
Ukali.
Hana. Nice.
Okay. We are going to do something slightly different now. When we finish, we are going to do a healing blessing that you can all participate in. And to do that, we have these pieces of nature that people have brought from around the world. And what we do is you just take one as I pass it around. Let it choose you. You don't have to sit and meditate on which one is right for you. Trust it. Okay? Pick one, pass it on, and then we're going to ask one of our staff to come up and lead you in the blessing. And that would be Stuart, if you please.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, before anything else gets passed around?
Okay, yeah, right. We have something else to do. This is a free meeting, and I want you to all feel comfortable with that. We are a nonprofit organization, and we have some projects that you may be interested in. So one of the projects you see on the table back there, some pink booklets and some blue booklets. These are both healing techniques. One of them has to do with aloha, and how you follow blessing. The other one is a very exciting healing technique called dynamite. And we give those away for free. And we send them out anywhere in the world, single copies to anybody at no cost. If you want a number of copies, we ask for a donation. But single copies, we send them out everywhere. They're also online in about 30 translations, different languages. And they're for free download. So this is one of the projects we have that we do. Okay? We also have a distant healing project. We have people who will, if you have a problem, you can go to our site, and we have one place on the site where you can do it for yourself with feedback, and we can also send an email, and we have people who will do their best to help you with your problem. So these are some of the things.
When you were speaking about the ecstatic dance, and
Yes.
talking about the energy just
Yes.
not really being focused on anything specific after the dance, at least.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
Right, and not as a group, and maybe people are doing it individually.
Good to feel good.
Can you like come upon source of energy like that that's been built through an experience and tap into
Sure.
it for your own?
Yes, there are places in the world where people have gathered over a long period of time, and usually these are places that are built on what you might call a power spot. In Europe, there's so many of these. A lot of churches have been built on these places. The Druids had hilltops and places like that. In Hawaii, there are natural spots like that, around a natural spring, for instance, along the edge of a ridge. Those were places where temples would typically be built, okay, to take advantage of the ocean energy. And on the end of a ridge, most heiau sites would be on the edge of a ridge facing the ocean with two streams of water. And if there wasn't a stream on one side, they would build a little canal so that there would be. That was considered making it stronger as far as energy goes. But there are also places that are where people have gathered for a long time for celebrations and things like that. And with a little practice, you can feel the energy. It doesn't always stay there. Sometimes something happens with the earth or the location and things change, and you can go to a place that has been so powerful for years, and then suddenly it's like there's nothing there anymore. It happened with Stonehenge, as an example. Okay? But the energy shifted to another part of that larger area. Salisbury seems to have picked up the energy that Stonehenge used to have. But there's a lot of places like that in the world, yes. So if you're familiar with a place where people have especially expressed an awful lot of joy and happiness, why, that's going to be wonderful energy to tune into, to feel, and do your focus. Okay, Stuart.
Aloha, everybody. Everybody have a piece of nature with them? All right. So I first off invite you to focus on this piece of nature. Look it over. Allow your attention to just be narrowed down to the colors, the shape, the feel, the weight, perhaps the smell. Maybe it's calling to you. But anyways, put your attention on this piece as much as you can. And then, as you allow this focus to be on this piece, allow your focus to shift to some relationship that you have particularly enjoyed. A relationship of harmony and love and fun and joy. It may be a relationship with another human being. It may be a relationship with an animal. It may be a relationship with a place, or even some deity. But allow your attention now, allow your focus to go to the fun and joy and love and pleasure of this relationship. Feel how good that harmony is. How wonderful it is to be in harmony. To dance in that harmony. Mentally with this other person or being or animal or the earth or the deity. Dance. Fully enjoy the feeling of the physical movement in harmony. Perhaps you can envision dancing, waltzing, or whatever dance you do with whatever it is that you're thinking of. But feel the intensity of the joy of that harmony. And hold that feeling. Hold that feeling now as you think about Madame Pele and what Pele is doing these days. And all the people that are affected on this island, all over the island, by what is happening with Pele. And so let us make a blessing, let us make a prayer, a healing for all the people and all the land that is involved with Pele, that we all may be in harmony, that Pele may be in harmony with us and we in harmony with Pele, whatever it is that happens. So we send out this prayer for healing, energized with our own feelings about harmony, that we may all be in harmony with this land, with this wonderful volcano that we have all chosen to live on, and that we may enjoy our lives here on this island in the midst of this very unusual situation. Enjoy the feeling of harmony. Feel that harmony, even though we don't know what's happening. And then, as a physical act, I invite you to use your breath. Use your breath to express all the feelings, all the energy, all the prayers, all the healing that you wish, and put it into this piece of nature. And blow all of these wishes, all of these blessings, all of these healings into this one little piece of nature. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Wow. All right.